Richard, thanks very much. Well, for some more perspective on all this, Tim Hewell has been looking at some of the ways in which the government and communities have been trying to take on radical Islamist ideologies.
Leighton, East London, one of the areas of Britain the government believes is most likely to be a breeding ground for extremism. Up a narrow flight of stairs beside a mosque is a project the state's invested in as part of its key counter-terrorism plan, the PREVENT strategy. It's a youth club, the Active Change Foundation, where games and other activities are a tool to draw often disaffected, mainly Muslim young people in from the streets, listen to their problems and engage them in discussion.
I think over the last 10 years, the period of 10 years, we've built up such a relationship within the community and the young people where we're recognised as, if you like, the middle people between the authorities and the young people. So, you know, the young people, they've kind of learned to trust us in the past years.
The PREVENT strategy was set up after the 2005 London bombings to try to tackle the radicalisation of Muslim youth by integration and by argument. But for places like this, youth workers say there'd be far more extremists like the two suspected of Wednesday's horrific murder in Woolwich.
If a young person is angry about the foreign policy, at the end of the day, I mean, we don't. One thing is that they might see on the internet or on the news a situation, someone's taken, you know, things into their own hand and gone and done this. We'll say to them, that's wrong. If you're against foreign policy, this is not the way to deal with it. This is not the way to tackle with it.
But state funding for this project and others was cut back when the coalition government came to power. That followed criticism that PREVENT was unfocused and that it sometimes even subsidised the very extremist organisations it should have been confronting. That's not stopped youth workers here getting on their bikes every day, even in the rain, to engage with young people in parks and on street corners, and to find out what they're thinking. They didn't want us to follow them because, of course, it's bad for their credibility to be seen with outside authority figures. And that points up one of the difficulties of the whole programme. It's about integration, but it's also about intelligence gathering, and some people think that's not a very comfortable combination. PREVENT has to avoid being seen as a form of state snooping, but on the other hand, to be an effective counter-terrorism policy, it has to help identify potentially dangerous extremists.
You're listening, and if you hear, or any of the outreach workers hear things that worry them,
yep,
in terms of inclination towards terrorism, extremism,
yep,
do you report that, and to who?
You don't need to report that. We bring those young people into our centre, we talk to them, we have workshops, specifically designed workshop depending on the subject or the issue out on the street with that young person. We like I said, we have developed a relationship with our young people. They do trust us. So when they're angry and upset about something, yes, they do voice it out to us. They might not do it with anybody else.
But isn't it your duty to report that as part of the strategy?
But report what? What are we reporting? What are we supposed to be reporting? When someone's life's at danger? Yes, I agree with you.
Report that someone might have an inclination towards terrorism.
That's absolutely right. But when we talk to young people out there, they're angry, they're upset. They've got a right to be angry and upset about that. But they're not telling me they're going to go and do something bad, are they? So what am I trying to report? What are you asking me?
In practice, they do sometimes exchange information with the authorities. But of course, the most dangerous people may be off the radar of projects like this. In the wake of the Woolwich killing, the project's head, Hanif Kadir, has rushed back early from a trip to Pakistan. He's afraid some extremists will now try to copy Wednesday's atrocity, and he can't confront them because the government's nervous about letting organisations like his tackle the most incendiary preachers in debate.
I think it's become very risk adverse. Now, being very risk adverse, this is risky business. We as an organisation have set ourselves out to challenge this problem. We know there are risks associated to this. We have to take certain calculated risks. We have to challenge these individuals head on.
So has the PREVENT programme failed because its scope's been too narrow?
PREVENT was always lacking in ambition. It only concentrated on the violent end of the extremist spectrum, so it only concerned itself with violent extremism and looked at intervening at that point. Unfortunately, they should have been going much further downstream and looking at people who espouse extremist views. As we've seen in Woolwich, people who hold extremist views then go on to commit terrorist attacks. And we need to be going into that milieu, that subculture of extremism which preaches separation and confrontation with British society and with our values, and working on people at that stage, because once they go operational, it's too late.
Community engagement like this may have prevented some attacks, but it hasn't solved the problem of radicalisation. And as we've seen this week, the price of getting it wrong is very high.
Well, I'm joined now to discuss this by Hanif Kadar, the